nice to see everyone, and thanks for Kayleen and David for arranging some time for the presentation. And you know, this is my daughter Eryn, who was the mastermind of the trip. She's a master planner, and I've traveled with Eryn hiking in mountains and that a few times now, and it's always an extreme pleasure. These kinds of trips are you know, really highlights of for me of my life. You know, being able to go on these with Eryn, they're quite special. And so this was really a traveling and a hiking trip, and we've got quite a multitude of experiences. So. And some tall tales to tell as we go along. So I hope you'll enjoy it as we go, and I hope I don't put Eryn on the spot too much. Eryn works in Toronto, but she heard we were doing this, and so she's going to work from home for a couple of days and be here for Easter weekend. So she made it down here. So I'm Rob Lee, for those of you that don't know me, or what's left of them, and it's a pleasure to be here and just have some fun tonight. So, I'll just click along here. Eryn wasn't you know, part of putting these slides together, because she told me right away, she says, "Oh, I can tell a man did these slides, because someone could have picked up much, much better pictures of what we took." So, anyway, before we got to this was arriving in the Yukon, but before this even happened, the only reason I guess we got to go to the Yukon was kind of a fluke too, because it's fairly expensive, and it would have been quite expensive to do what we were doing. But Eryn volunteered at a workshop, and fill in the details as you wish.
I volunteered for GovFest, which is like the government battle of the bands. And then they had like a draw that night for a free raffle to 2 tickets to anywhere in Canada. And then I think there was some oohs and ahs over, can someone on the volunteer committee win this? But by then my name was already announced, so I officially won. When I first got the tickets, I thought, what's the most expensive place I can go in Canada? We're gonna go there. And so I genuinely picked Iqaluit. And then they were like, no, it's like $7,000 to go there. Actually, there's a limit. And so Yukon was kind of a place I knew I always wanted to go. Flights can be anywhere from like $1,800 to $2,000. So it was within the budget. And so yeah, that's where we landed.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, you know, I was lucky because Eryn could have taken anybody along, but she decided to take the old man, which was very cool. So in preparation for the trip, of course, I'm a canoeist, so I have my canoe bag and all the stuff for the canoe. Well, Eryn looks at my stuff and she knows what my stuff is and says, you know, "Dad, like, you can't do this with this stuff. We're going mountain climbing and hiking in the mountains." And I go, "Oh, no, it'll be fine. I got my roll-up air bed that's about this big." And anyway, finally Elaine, my wife, who was quite smart about it, she came to me after she talked to Eryn and said, "Rob, you get what Eryn wants, or I'm just going to buy stuff for you, and you probably won't like it, and you're going to be stuck with it." So I went back to Eryn and I got a proper bedroll, I got a proper sleeping bag. She wanted me to have walking sticks, and I said, "No way," but I bought walking sticks, and away we went.
To confirm, he's glad he bought.
Oh my! Was I glad I had all that stuff. I may have perished out there without it, but you'll see why as we get into these slides. So I have a BioLite stove, which I thought, well, it's great for canoe trips. And that BioLite stove, you just put in little fragments of wood, and you can cook a big dinner, whatever you want, on very little. Of course, we're above Alpine for a lot of the times, so there's no wood. We weren't going to carry it, so Eryn also had her little mini.
To be clear, I knew his stove wouldn't work, so I brought mine, but it's fine.
So we could eat. So this was a route overview. So we landed in Whitehorse, we headed to Carcross, and we'll walk through these. Then we went to Skagway, Haines River, Chilkoot State Park. We fished the river. I have I have a passion for fishing, and Eryn shares that passion, and Erin's a pretty good fly fisher woman now, and so I brought my fly rod, and we picked one up at Canadian Tire for Eryn when we were there, and so we were prepared for these things. And we went to Haines Junction by Emerald Lake, Kluane National Park, where we did King's Throne, Oriole Trail. I don't think we did that. Did we do that? No, we left that one. St. Elias Lake Trail we did, Sheep Creek Trail. Then we went on to Dawson City, went into Tombstone Territorial Park, and we did the Grizzly Lake Trail, the Golden Sides Trail, back to Whitehorse, and canoed the Yukon River. So in Eryn's master planning and all of that, it was not grueling. It's busy and it taxes. I was almost 65 when we did this, so I thought, okay, but it was good. So this is when we first got there. We're on the way to Carcross, and the scenery in the Yukon it's just gorgeous. And we lucked out because they had had a rainy summer and it had been really bad weather. We got there, the skies cleared, and yeah, that in itself was quite unique, that we had that. At the side there's a gorge in the Yukon River where we were going to canoe through, but there was heavy rains, and we thought every year they lose a few people in that, and we thought, nah. So we canoed another section instead. So we started heading to Skagway, and at this point we're really worried because this is 2022, right? And COVID was still, there were all kinds of restrictions, checking you at the border crossings. Eryn had COVID 2 weeks before we left. So we're thinking, if I get COVID and I test positive and we're trying to get back and we've got all these plans, so we started thinking, do we risk it?
For context, Skagway's in Alaska, so you're crossing, you're crossing a border.
Yeah, so we're heading over to Skagway, and this hiking trail was on the way. You can see there's ropes held down. It's just our first that was an afternoon hike. That was a very low difficulty hike. It was just for pleasure along the side of the road. But anyway, we're starting to think that this time, what are we going to do about COVID? We hummed and hawed, and anyway, we had too much at stake because we had some fly fishing booked on I've got the name of the river there, but when we get into Alaska, so we thought, no, we're going to do that. So at Carcross, beautiful lake, and it was a nice warm day. We tried to go for a swim there, and we swam in Lake Huron in May, right? So we're used to cold water, and we can tough that out. We got ankle deep there, and I can't feel anything anymore. I'm pulling my ankles. Neither of us would go in. So then some families started showing up. We're sitting on the beach and like turtles in the sun, and here these families show up with little kids, and they're out playing in the water, having a great time. It was like that kid that gets sand kicked in his face on the beach. It's embarrassing. So instead of that, there was a bridge just to, it would be to the left if you were sitting there looking out in the lake. So of course we got our fly rods, went over there, and got them out to see if everything was fine. And we didn't get anything, but there were some First Nations kids fishing off the bridge, and one got a lake trout. It was a good size, which whet our appetite for things to come. So again, we're still on our way to Skagway, and we come across the Carcross Desert. So this is weird because it's a big sandy desert in the middle of the mountains, and you think, how can this happen? Well, this would have been a lake bottom at one time, and with shifting tectonics and things, the lake bottom is now dry, and thus it's Carcross Desert. And Eryn showing off her balance. Talented girl, amazing.
One of the photos I would have approved, actually.
There are some here she did not approve coming out. So,
That looks good.
we finally left there in our journey and we got to Skagway. Now, I'm going to, you're going to hear some bias that I have, like, if Skagway is the only place you can go in Alaska, and it's the only way you can get somewhere, oh great, go for it. Skagway is the last place on earth that I ever want to spend another week one afternoon. These ships roll in, and to me it was like, oh, this is horrible. These ships roll in one after another, like giant ships. All the tours, a bell goes off and everybody walks down the ramp and they walk downtown. And this is the downtown, and everybody has a little bag, and most of them will say shirts, I've been to Alaska. And they walk back and the ship blows a horn and they get back on the ship and away they go again. There's a little train you can take, actually I think I have a slide of it, that goes along the road out of Skagway that you drive to get in. But it's just full of these giant ships. Now, of course, Eryn and I have to wait for a ferry. We're taking a small ferry over to Haines. So we got some time to kill, so we're walking around town. If you take one block back from that main street,
Desolate.
desolate. And so I started, later on in the trip, I started asking, who owns all those places in Skagway and that? They're not locals. So, what's happened is they've come in, these ships have a market, and it really didn't appear to us like it was doing a whole lot for the local environment. The economy, I don't know, maybe a lot stays. But we did find one wild animal in Skagway, right there. Beautiful big porcupine. Yeah, it's big.
Not pictured the like 40 people around it though.
Yeah.
That's like Skagway environment.
Yeah, that was back away. Yeah. And it was funny too, I laughed because people will get off those ships and they pay a whole lot of money and they get in the little boat and they drive out to the end of the fjord, turn around and come back. Then they get back on the ship. It's just me. So anyway, at Skagway, where am I here? Come on. There it is. At Skagway, you can catch smaller ferries. Now, these are really cool. These ferries, I don't know, they probably take a few hundred people. But they stop at all the little communities all along the Alaskan coast. And you could go on that ferry and go to the back deck, and they have tie-downs where you can set up your tent and clamp it down onto the deck, and you can sleep on the deck and set up your tent. That would be an awesome way to see the Alaskan coastline. And we only took this ferry from Skagway to Haines, but it was beautiful, it was not large. Camping on the boat amazed me. It was probably similar to the size of the, no, it was smaller than the Chichimon.
Yes.
It'd be smaller than the Chichimon, because
Yeah.
you didn't have it.
It did take cars though.
Yeah, but when you drive onto that, you also have to, you don't drive through like the Chichimon. They get everybody and you back out, so if you're not good at backing up, they'll help you. But you hear them mutter. So that was very cool. So we got to Haines now. So we're still in Alaska. And
Are we cooking?
Yep.
yep.
Pretty
This was
sweet
very
view.
neat because Eryn had found a little spot right on the beach. And it was damp and that, but I mean, you're going to get that. That was a great place to camp because we could get up at sunrise and everything going on. And right close to here was the Chillicoot River. And that got me all excited because we were going to fish some salmon on the Chilkoot with our fly rods. And so we hung out here for a couple of days as we prepared to fish the Chilkoot. Now, we did a couple of things that were like, Eryn is a proficient fly fisher woman. I don't know how she's pictured with this big salmon, and I got this little, it just doesn't seem right. But we had a lot of fun, and it was fairly stained mountain water, and so we learned that they would sit in front of the rocks, and if you took your streamer, and you brought your streamer, which is like a little fly that represents a minnow, in front of the rocks, and just hung there for a minute, they'd hammer it. So we caught, how many did we catch that day?
We each got 3.
Each? Oh no, I got more than 3.
Never mind.
Anyway,
What was the limit?
so that was, for me, that was, and they are pink salmon, by the way, and they were sea run, so yeah, they put up a really good fight. The pink salmon I get on Lake Huron, like that's a big one. These were different creature altogether.
So did you, of course you had some for your supper?
No, we threw them all back.
Catch and release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we didn't really have facilities and to do it right,
Yeah.
and we had our cans of beans.
Not bitter at all.
So this was cool. We're fishing on the river, and all of a sudden, Mama and 2 cubs, these are grizzlies, are coming up along the edge, and we're maybe here to the wall out in the river. And here comes Mom and the cubs, and you would be amazed how fast Eryn can walk in deep water and current when there's 2 grizzly bears coming down the shoreline. Now, we got well out of their way. You can see them. They're still here, and Eryn's on the move getting out because we just wanted them to keep going. And they were heading up to a fish weir where a fish would be trapped up. I don't know what the weir was for. Maybe just doing counts, I bet, just to see how many come. And the grizzlies will go up to the fish weir and scoop a couple out and take them into the bush and have a meal. And everybody's happy, no problem. Until you get some tourists that want to get close to the bear, take some pictures. And the big mama had charged a tourist a couple of days earlier. Wow. And she stopped on the charge, which grizzlies most often do. But they'll test your mettle when they come at you. And with 2 cubs, we got right out of their way. Now,
We saw one on its hind legs with some dogs in this area as well.
yeah, and we saw a mom and 2 cubs crossing a road on the road going into that river. Yeah, so there were a lot of grizzlies hanging around there, just doing their thing. But that was a real highlight too. That was fun. So in the same area, we're camping at the waterfront. We went to Chilkoot State Park and did some hiking. And a lot of that is in alpine lakes and beautiful, beautiful scenery. And we're walking along, and all of a sudden we see an eating salmon laying on the shore. And we're like, we know what eats salmon. So all of a sudden we're doing a whole lot more listening and looking over our shoulder. But it was fine. And the thing was that we didn't see anybody in these places. Like just occasionally you'd run into somebody. But it really is an area that if you don't want crowds, it's very, very nice.
We met some European couples who said they specifically come to the Yukon for their hiking because it's less busy than going to like the Swiss areas or BC, and they just don't want crowds. And it's true, you didn't really get that anywhere.
No.
Did you carry any bear spray?
Anyway?
Bear spray?
Oh yeah, we always had it with us. Although I question how useful it is if it comes right down to it.
Yeah.
But you have to carry it, yeah. So now we had to get back into Canada, so we started heading towards Haines Junction. Now, at this point, when we went into the States, I said, look, if I get to the border and something weird happens and they test me, I'll say, yeah, and we're going so far into the mountains, they're not gonna find us for 2 weeks anyway. And I'll take my licks when I come out. So we're driving up to the border, a little bit stressed out, you know, with what's gonna happen. But we'd made that commitment, we were gonna be outlaws, we'll just run it, and they'll never find us. And so we got to the border, they didn't care, they didn't ask any questions. But the scenery from Haines Junction back into the Yukon in these valleys was just beautiful. And Eryn has a good eye for pictures. She usually tries to find some of the local fauna.
Please don't judge based on these ones.
Or local flora, you know, with things in the background. It was very, very, very pretty. As everywhere, like when we were traveling.
You can judge this one.
I took that for the scenery. And I'm not sure whether you were excited we found a washroom or
Personality.
personality. No shortage of that. So now we're going into Kluane National Park. And our first hike there was what they call King's Throne. Now, King's Throne, believe it or not, we camped on Kathleen Lake, so the campground was back in here. And so you start walking in King's Throne and you get to, you walk around the lake and then you turn and you start heading up into King's Throne. Now that doesn't look like a long hike, but these are multiple day hikes. It was a good first hike, you know. So here we are, we're on our way up to the first hike in Kluane National Park. We're now back in the Yukon.
Actually, going back to that map, if I was going to give any advice when you're planning these hikes, it's more about look at what your elevation gain is.
Yeah.
Because that looks short, but
You're
how
right.
high are you going, how quickly?
Good point. So here's me as we start the trail, and there's where we're going up here to King's Landing. You'll see the snow up there, so you know, although it doesn't look like much on the map, when you start walking it, that one was, to get King's Landing, 4 or 5 hours.
There's a ridge where most people stop, and I would say 4 to 5 hours, and then you can keep going. So this is the ridge that we normally hike to, and then you can go all the way up this and hike along this ridge, and that takes you to a full day hike.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
What was the elevation there?
So we're heading up, and at this point, she said there's this plateau, and it's actually what they call King's Landing. But on the way there, you're walking up a lot of loose rock and that, and you know, like, if you have a competitive piece in you, it's hard to get rid of that. And so I'm halfway up this scree, and I look back and I see some young guy coming up, and I didn't say anything to Eryn, but in my inside voice, he's not passing me. So I start trucking it, I'm pushing it to get up there. I finally get up there and he just comes up over. Well, then we start talking to him. He's a real nice kid. He was from Vancouver, and we can catch up with him a little bit later. But anyway, Eryn says, I'd like to go up on the next level, and do you want to go up? And they said, oh, it'd only be a couple hours. I said, well, you know what? I've done well on a first hike. I'll wait here. You guys go, right? Because it's not good to travel alone, you know, with grizzlies and that. So up the two of them go. Well, what it actually was 2 hours one way and 2 hours back. So I'm sitting here and you can see the elevation. It's cold. So by the time they come back, I have found raincoats and I'm huddled in a ball underneath a bush. And I go, I can't leave, right? I wonder what happened to me. And I'm just freezing with this wind coming down the mountain that started about half an hour after they left. And they come down the hill, and all I would just listen, and about every hour I might hear somebody up there, and took a little peek, oh, it's not them. Go back in. When they came down, they saw this big black ball in the bushes. They thought it was a bear. So
It was like you saw the black ball, and then he rolled up like this, and so we both like, oh my god.
by doing that, I'd have growled.
Look, it didn't spray.
Yeah, that's
Also, peak drama queen. He had a little nap. It was fine. He had a view. I'm pretty sure he had a book.
I did the alpine squirrels, and I became friends. I was flicking them crackers, and they come up pretty close. It was cool. It was all cool. No, this is more of that's me after the wind started coming. You see, I'm having a lot of fun. That's I walked up in there to try to keep warm and back, and that's what we were climbing up. You can't really see how far that is, but you hit past the tree line, and then you're into this stuff, and it was tough slugging on that because it's not your footing's not secure. But I beat that guy.
Eryn, how was it up there?
Pictures to come.
Oh,
I think it's next slide, right?
I'm not sure.
Oh, no. Okay. I guess I can just describe it then. Like barren. So you would go up and there was kind of shrubbery, and then when you get to the very top, it was complete just like gravel scree. And he's whining about the wind, but up there you had nothing. And so you honestly kind of had to hunker down because you'd get big gusts where you wouldn't want to. It wasn't narrow enough that you would fall off of it, but it would like move you. But it was honestly, it was kind of that, but just slightly higher, so you could see more of the clouds over the lake. There's pictures of it in the book if you want to see. Maybe I'll just pass it
Oh, I
around.
didn't mention the book, yeah.
Because the view's a little bit different, but honestly, it was mostly just more height, more
Pass
exposure.
that around if you want, or just leave it there.
This is the view at the top.
Erin made me the
if
book
you want to
for-
pass it around.
From the trip, with some of her selections of photos, so, which are probably
Better.
superior. So, anyway, so then we did this was only maybe 3 hours in, maybe 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours in, and just do an alpine lake, and you're in the lower, greenery, you're not up in alpine. But the neat thing is a beautiful lake in there, and we carted our fly rods in, and we fished several spots, but we didn't even see a minnow or any life in that lake at all. I have no idea if there is or not. But there was a boat there, but it was chained up, so we couldn't hijack the boat. So, the Elias Trail is right there, going into that lake, right there. So we're all in the same kind of area in Kluane. And again, we're staying on Kathleen Lake now. It has a fish stock in there. Kokanees that are landlocked become
Oh.
anyway, they have landlocked salmon in that lake that we could see feeding. I may have this down here somewhere. Kokanee is the landlocked
Yeah,
salmon.
that's the landlocked one.
Yeah.
I thought it was
I think it's
sockeye.
king salmon and sockeye.
Sockeye
A
too.
landlocked sockeye is a kokanee, and so there's kokanee all in through there.
All types of salmon.
Yeah, it was fun. So now we're heading up to Sheep Creek, and so we come back out. We come back to Haynes Junction, and this is our whole map. So now we're going up here. This is Dawson way up here. We've gone into the States. We've come back, and we've been in Kluane. Now we're going up to Sheep Creek Trail, and that was very, very cool. On the way up, let's see, I can show, I think I have a picture of it next. No, I don't. I have a picture here that I'll explain it when we get to it, because it's, this is visitor center going into Sheep Creek, which was it was a pretty extensive hike, that one. And you know, these white dots here in the distance are sheep, on sheep.
Oh.
So, and there's quite a population of them that we could see, but they're so far away, and then the slope on that would be horrendous to try and get any closer. So we went up Lower Alpine, then you start heading up. Everything is elevation. You know, it's not distance, it's elevation when you start hiking there. So that's what you want to really look at. This was a fairly significant elevation hike. It was kind of a muddy trail that we were following. And I got up there, and at this point, I'm still not using poles, right? I'm just walking. I got up to this elevation, and this is Alex that we met. He met us there and went on this trail as well. I got to here, this is the end of the trail, but for those who are hardy, can go further and again up along the ridge line and then back down. So again, you know, do you want to go up the further ridge line? No, but I'm not waiting here either. So they went onto the ridge line, and I started back. I got maybe half a mile back, and we just walked up there, half a mile back. Here's this great big bear crap in the middle of the path, and I'm by myself, but I'm not too worried because I got into the tree line, so I'm figuring it's a black bear, right? So I go on my way and get back. Eryn and Alex head up to the ridge line, and they start heading across. And this is a story you'll have to tell, Eryn, but we had, you know, partridge, mountain partridge and things. That was just where we parted ways. Over here, right there, is a really big grizzly. And Eryn and Alex were walking along. Maybe you want to tell this story.
Sure. We parted ways, let's say here, and then you go straight up a ridge, and then you go up another ridge, and then one more. And it was on our way back down, so we were going down, and there was a group of 3 behind us, and we were just chatting, not paying attention, and then suddenly they're yelling at us, you're walking into like a bear territory, because we were looking down at this sort of plateau. And so we suddenly saw it pop up from the scrub. I immediately was terrified. I'm not used to bears. It's a grizzly. You could tell because it had the hump, and it was a big one. Alex lives in Vancouver, so he's less stressed about bears than me. And he was like, let's get closer. I'm like, no, you can, but see you never. Goodbye. But the hard part about this was there was a path that went around sort of another little hill, and the bear walked that way, so you couldn't see it anymore, but you knew it was there, in the path, in the direction where you want to go. And so like, do we sit here and wait until it's walked somewhere else? We'll never really know where it is now, and we're going to have to keep crisscrossing. So if it's going straight down and we're doing this, like the odds of us bumping into it again are pretty high. And so we ended up, it was really cool, and I would love to get this for future hikes, would recommend if you're a gadget person. But he had a GPS on his Apple Watch or whatever that tracked exactly the hike you've done. And so then we were able to go off trail like a different way that we knew it wasn't headed, so we could meet up back with our own path. But if he hadn't been there, I think it would have been like 40 minutes of stressfully holding your bear spray, hoping and listening. We were never close enough to it to be scared, and there were other people around, so even more so, less scary because, you know, it's way more intimidated by 5 people than we are of it. But it was really cool to see from the distance. It had like the big waddling hips. The girl we were hiking with on the way down, because we all kind of joined up to have more people in a group. And she was telling us about a time on this exact same hike where she came around the corner and there was one and it charged her. And she said, we were talking about how if we were ever in a situation where we did get charged, do you think we would be smart enough and strong enough to actually take the advice you're taught?
Because you do a lot of training
They
before
make you
you
do
go into
training,
these parks.
yeah.
They
Make you watch
tell you
videos.
must do these things. So you have a good sense?
And so if you get charged, you're supposed to just stand, you don't scream at it, you just, well, it depends on how it's approaching at you, but if it's charging you, you just stand there. And we asked her, like, were you able to do it? And she said yes, but as soon as it turned away, she said, I immediately started bawling because nothing prepares you for being that up close to something so wild. So yeah, it happens out there where you do have to be prepared, you have to be smart about it. But I feel super lucky to have gone to see one in the wild environment without it being a stressful situation.
Good.
Yeah.
Is the ones on the river, we knew they were eating.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this is the one that I wanted to mention. This is part of Lake Kluane, which is dropping rapidly annually. Does anyone know about what's happening with this lake? Okay. So, as the glaciers are receding now with climate change, the inflow, as it receded, actually opened up a pathway to the Pacific instead of running to the Arctic. So the main glacier feeding the river and the lake receded, and the flow began in the opposite direction. And in the course of just a few days, the inflow into the lake became a trickle. In 2016, the flow was 350 cubic meters per second, and it dropped down in July to 60. And so now every year, this lake is just disappearing. And it will disappear.
And the interesting thing is, that's actually a road built through it now.
Oh. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. That was a shocker to see that. Okay, this was cool. So after we'd been on this day hike, we had a campsite, and I've never seen this before, and we never saw it again afterwards, and I think there's probably a story to it. But they had a campground that if you had a camper, I mean, you could pull it up anywhere. And I really like the provincial campgrounds because you just pulled up and you stayed there, and they just made sure there's a bit of wood, there was a washroom, and you fill out a ticket, it was on the honor system, and away you go. But in this particular one, anyone that wasn't in a vehicle and you had a tent to set up, you had to go behind the electric fence. So you had to carefully open the electric fence, and in you go and you set up your tent. We hadn't had any meat for a while, and Alex had a truck that was all set up. Because Alex was going from BC, and he was testing his equipment, because this year he went all across Canada, and his goal was to do 2 trails in every national park. And he was doing that, but he was also doing a bunch in the States at the same time. So he had hamburger. So I'm out there cooking up hamburger on our little cook stove, and the guy comes in, he says, there's a grizzly right at the the entrance to the little park here, and there's no park staff or anything, it's just at the side of the road, which is great. So I thought, okay, well, if I see it, I'm done cooking, right? I'll just jump in here. But it was unique. It was unique. I've never seen that. So we had a nice night there, and there were no issues. And away we went the next day. I suspect something must have happened there, because the other ones weren't like this. And there must be a story that something happened there. But I hate to think what. So, on the way back, we're heading back to Whitehorse to get some supplies, because then we're heading up to do our hikes in Tombstone. So I saw this creek on the way in, and I just made a mental note. On the way out, when we're not on a timeline, we're going to stop and fish this creek. So there's nobody around, and we had our fly rods. You can see Eryn's got her bear spray, and we were catching grayling, like beautiful grayling. Like some of them are about like this, which I'm told is a good size for a grayling. And we released them all again, but they're just beautiful. Grayling are voracious, voracious feeders on flies. We had a lot of fun there.
It's hard to see in the picture, but if you Google it, they have almost rainbow colored fins that are lovely colors.
Yeah.
That's what you tried to tell us.
Sweet.
You tried.
So, now we're on our way back. We're heading up to Dawson City from Whitehorse. So this is just some of the scenery that we saw on the way by. There's Pelly Crossing, that's across the Yukon, one of the areas there. They would bring stuff up to Dawson to bring supplies. But, oh, it's beautiful, and it's not like there's places that you can pull over to. It's not a busy road. There's always construction there in the summer, so build in extra time because they've got to go at it when they can. And you can get held up for quite a while. So we got to Dawson, and we were at a camp. I think we were camping the first night up there. And anyway, we had tickets into the dredge. I had not heard of the dredging in Dawson. It was fascinating. These things, of course, were high-tech at the time and industrial in their ability to sift for gold. And they would literally dig out the front, and they had churns and water running through them, and since density is high density as compared to all the stone, the gold would separate. And that was sponsored by a lot of New York money. And so this thing would literally dig a hole, it would fill with water, and they would float through the landscape, digging, moving, very, very slowly, digging, moving, and taking the gold out of everything up until then, like all the individual gold panners and that, like these things were unbelievable. And so I've got some pictures of the inside, but there's the junk going out the back and they're digging out the front. And they just keep on moving. Guys running all these cables. They've only had, what, 5 or 6 people working on a big dredger? There wasn't many. There wasn't very many at all. But they all lived in a camp, a town outside Dawson, and it was a community within itself. And it was gold if you could get a job on one of the dredgers, because they built the community, you've got your kids there, you've got your family there, and you've got a guaranteed income, and but huge and archaic and to see, but...
And you can still see in the landscape there where they would have passed through, because it'd be giant gravel, like rolling gravel, because you can see exactly the path it moved, but then plants and other things have grown over it, so it's a weird topography there now. It's pretty cool.
And it was funny because I'd swear her ancestors, were certainly in that industry, because there were a few people on the tour that would question about the environmental impact of this. Not us, right? And she was adamant, well, ducks live in the ponds now made from all the scree heaps and things like that, and that's true. And she said there were more moose because they moved into the area because it was opened up and had all... But it was interesting, really interesting. Very friendly people. Some of them a little off. Very friendly. So, yeah, that's the inside one of the big churning wheels. Just churning all the gravel and breaking it up, and yep, the New York money paid for the dredger. That gear at the bottom, they had to replace one, and this was, what would have been the Yukon Gold Rush?
1898.
1890s, yeah, something like that. One of the wheels on that dredger was $1 million then. Wow. They had to replace one, so they sent 3 up the river. 2 of them were lost, and 1 of them made it. But that's how much money they were making, that was like, get $1 million wheel up there. So, there's Dawson City, dirt roads, very cool
It felt
place.
kind of like an amusement park for like a western town. It felt very, yeah, for sure.
And the houses there, I made note, they're jacked up and leveled about every 5 years as the permafrost is melting there. And so they have to keep jacking up the houses because they're sinking down into the ground. And so that's just a cost of living in Dawson City, is you gotta jack your house up about every 5 years.
What's the population of Dawson City?
Oh, it's very small, but the number of people actually live there,
Yeah, like
as
year-round.
compared to the number of people that flow through there, is gigantic. But
'Cause their
Dawson
summer's so
City in the
short.
winter,
Yeah. We asked them,
Couldn't
like, how do
imagine.
you stop people from getting depressed, or how do you get through your really long winters? And they said they'll just have costume parties. It's with the same, like, 12 people, because, but you would go to different bars and dress up and.
close I came to that was living in Edmonton in the winter.
No,
Dawson would be-
Yeah, it's a whole other level. You could definitely tell there was an attitude there and a culture of new frontier, like we're modern day explorers.
Yeah.
A bit of an anti-government vibe.
Oh, yeah.
Like we don't need you, we don't want you involved. We are a new frontier kind of.
But all their jobs are government.
Yes. Government
There was
subsidized
an
healthcare,
irony to
but
it.
it's fine.
So, okay, things I wanted to mention here. We're off to Tombstone. Oh, I had a picture of the post office. Did I miss that? No, it's next. This was the old post office in Dawson. And they've recreated some of the bars and the post office and this kind of thing. When they got the mail in Dawson City, all the, the guys working in the gold and everywhere else, they just bring in a bag and they dump it in the room. And you had to, no one was sifting through it for you, and it wasn't going to a mailbox. They just dump it in and you find your letters from wherever. Which I thought was good. So now, we're on our way to our, really our pinnacle hike, which is in Tombstone National Park. Now, we had to rent a car, and you had to rent a special rental from a guy, and there were very few that would rent their cars to go up the Dempster Highway, because cracked windshields and punctured tires are the norm. And so you go to Avis or any rental in Whitehorse, you can't go on the Dempster. When we went on there, the road wasn't that bad, because I think they've done some work on it.
I think it's fine until there's kind of a popular section where there's still campgrounds and famous hikes. But this goes all the way to Inuvik, which is the most northern tip of Yukon. You're getting into like subarctic zone.
Yeah.
Once you're past that popular zone, this highway is a nightmare.
Yeah. We were heading in on this to the Tombstone Interpretive Center to get our gear inspected and things, and that was 71.5 kilometers on the Dempster. If you go past the Interpretive Center, it's only 12 hours to the Arctic Ocean and to Inuvik, but it would be a grueling 12-hour drive, no doubt, and we weren't up to that. We had other things. So off we went to the Interpretive Center. Now, I should say that all the way along here, Eryn keeps asking people, like, Tombstone National Park, going into Grizzly Lake, do you think somebody older can do that trail? Or what do you think? And I would overhear these things and I think, so after a while I started thinking, I wonder if an older guy can do this trail. But at this point, I was totally committed. I thought, I am doing this no matter what, because Eryn had took me, so of course I'm going to do it. But at this interpretive center, it was interesting because they check your bear equipment can. They check that you got your bear spray. You have to watch, these videos on what to do and how to interpret bear interactions. And those videos were excellent. like they really helped me, like if I'm in Algonquin and even with black bears, I feel way more secure of what's going on now than I did before. They're excellent.
Yeah, when we told you earlier they make you watch videos, if you're just going to the Yukon, they have nowhere to catch you to make you watch those videos. It's if you need a backcountry permit,
You have to
before
watch
you
it.
get the permit, that's when they would make you watch
Yeah,
it.
and it's a good thing. And I don't know how they make the videos, because at some point they've got bears going at guys up a tree, and finally they said, you know, the bottom line is if you see a bear and it's kind of walking around, it's just eyeing you down, you're probably in trouble. Because most of them, if they bluster, they're scared and all that. If one's eyeing you like, you look like a good chicken leg to me, right? You may have a problem. And they say all the different techniques you can use, but if one's doing that and it's coming at you, they basically said it's you or it, so do your best. Good luck. But that only happens maybe 5 times a year in North America. You know, so we weren't too worried about that. So they checked for bear spray, all that stuff. So I'm getting a little nervous at this point. 'Cause I'm not seeing too many old guys.
At this point, we were 100% poker facing each other. He was stressed, I was stressed about him doing it, but we were both like, no, it's fine.
Yeah. So this is the Grizzly Lake Trail, and it's an overnight where the elevation, and this is the key thing, the elevation is 1,445 feet up. So you know you're going to have some steep stuff. We started in the lower foothills. We haven't even got to the tree line. I'm walking along here and I'm starting to feel a bit of a swagger, thinking, this isn't so bad, right? You know, we hadn't even got to where it begins. So here's some comments. Hard is accurate. I'm not an amateur, but not an expert, but I got about 5 miles. And that took me 5 hours. I decided to turn around at this point. 10 miles round trip took 8 hours. Grizzly was an amazing hike to experience the scenery, the people, and the sense of accomplishment you get from finishing the hike made it all worth it to come out to Tombstone. To hike Grizzly, be prepared to bring extra warm clothing. It gets below 0. Be prepared for intermittent weather. Store everything in your tent, since the marmots will snatch your belongings and rip them up for nesting. Won't have to worry much about the waters. There's 3 locations along the trail to fill up your water. We only brought 1 water bottle for the hike. Amazing place to use. And so, you know, I kind of looked at those things and thought, we can do this. So on the way up, and they're right, the first 5 miles is like grueling. Like it is grueling. And I remember once somebody saying, you know, like, whatever you do, you can cut it up in chunks and you'll be okay. So I got to the point where I thought, okay, I'm going to do 20 paces and then I'm going to rest. Because we have packs on and that too. And on the way in, you took a little more than I had. It's just, you know. So
No comment.
I would do 20 paces and then 20 more, and you'd go up over a ridge and you think, oh, I can make it to that. You get over that, and it's just another one anyway, and another one. So then I got to the point where I'd go 40 paces, and that's really, for me, that's how I got up those first 5 miles was, can I do 40 more steps? Sure. Do 40 more steps. And eventually we got up in the high country where it was just gorgeous, you know, just beautiful. And again, it had been raining all summer, been crappy weather, and it was beautiful that day. Well, all the time we were in there. The alpine flowers were starting to come out, and you just, oh, like it was breathtaking. You know. So there's Eryn with her pack, and you know, just more pictures. Oh, there's the marmots. Yeah, they're cool. They are very curious. They're not scared. This one saw us and finally just lays out in a rock, and he's just hanging out watching us watching it. You know. So now, oh, this was cool. you go through so many different landscapes from, you know, this kind of stuff to alpine meadow to boulder fields, which I might have a slide later on, but right down at the bottom is a pika.
Yeah.
Pika. And it's a very small animal. We were walking across one of these boulder fields, and how can I describe that sound? If you took a man, you put his nuts in a vise and you cranked it shut, it would scream like that. That's what it sounded like.
You nailed it.
And it was bone chilling to us the first time we heard it. We thought, is somebody warning us that we're about to have a grizzly attack? It was one of these little mice, and they just scream really loud. So that's a pika. So we're finally getting close to Grizzly Lake, and that's where we're going to set up camp for the night now. As we look down to the lake from here, that was still a few hours away. A couple hours anyway. We were like, oh, there's the lake. It's deceiving.
One of us was more excited than the other, as you can tell.
Yeah, so now we're going down to those patches of ice that you see down there by the lake. So we get down there and we've got, you know, some filters for water and things that we carried in. It was getting dark around midnight. So this was Eryn's paraphernalia, a nice warm hat, and
Oh yeah, because at that time of the year, we forgot to tell them it's light basically all night.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
is, okay.
So we finally had some darkness, finally had
Not
some
all night
sleep.
actually. By August, you had night, but it was
Yeah.
short.
At 5 a.m., we hear, we don't know where it's coming, how bad it is, but it's a rock slide. And we can hear it echoing all around us. So we're laying there, and that was weird. Just lay there and we waited and waited, and it stopped. But it was cool that we could experience it. But yeah.
Did all of the campsites have platforms to put tents on?
They get you off the ground there, and some of that is because of the marmots.
So in this spot, like a lot of backcountry hikes wouldn't necessarily have that. Here, it's more so because they're trying to protect the
It's
tundra.
restricted, yeah.
So you can see like they're really strict about, they've mapped out little areas around each platform even, and there's a very specific path with those lines around it too, because they want to keep this park accessible to people,
And
but
they-
people are going off trail all the time.
And they want
And
to
so
keep
they're
it
trying to keep
pristine.
it, yeah, because that kind of tundra, it's pretty easy to
Just destroy
stomp
it.
on that a few times and
Yeah.
it's wrecked.
So anyway, we survived the rock slide, and then the next day we're on our way out, and going down was easier. Oh, I should mention though,
Yeah.
after the hike before, where I came down, I saw the bear crap. I was by myself. Well, it was steep going down. By the time I got back, my knees were shot because you got your brakes on all the time, right? Mile after mile. I broke out those poles that Eryn suggested, and I had them the rest of the time, and they were a lifesaver here too, because you're going across boulders and for balance, and they truly were a necessity.
Yeah, they're not, no ageism here. They're like,
No.
they help support, they keep the weight off your knees when you're going up or
my knees
down.
were killing me when I got down that one hill without the poles. And then the other ones, I just stick them in front and just take that pressure off. You know, well worth it. So we drove, that's Alex in his super truck, which is all souped up. It's a Toyota. He's got showers built in and all kinds of stuff. He's a welder by trade, and boy, he had a really neat thing set up. So, let's see, where are we here? Oh, wait a minute. That's after when we came out, we're still at Tombstone. We took one more short hike. Now that was only a few hours, not even a few hours, it might be an hour to the top of that. Easy hike. and beautiful view. So, you know, even if you're not an avid hiker, there are places that you could go to really enjoy the scenery. You don't have to go on the long one.
From a
all
logistics
doable.
standpoint, in all of the parks we've shown, some of them were longer, some of them were shorter day hikes. There's always options in all of these parks
Yeah.
for quicker hikes, and sometimes they'll have it where it's an overlooking view where you're not climbing the whole way up. So definitely, you don't have to do intense hikes to go to the Yukon and enjoy it. And I would say the day hikes you don't have to plan far in advance. But if you are doing any backcountry hiking, looking at you specifically, Paige, you have to get permits for some of these like months in advance. Like Tombstone, I got our permits in May, and it's only because someone canceled. Whereas the day hikes, you kind of just show up.
And it's a good thing they restrict that, because that seclusion is very cool. There are a lot of Germans that that go out there, and a lot of people that the Alps is too busy for them now. So they've got money, they'll come to the Yukon. So that brings us back to Dawson City, and we had some time there. So we went to the bar where, does anyone here not know what the sour toe is? The sour toe? So some trappers, or some of the miners, or somebody got out there in the winter. Actually, I think it was a dog race. And he got frostbite, and he lost all his toes due to frostbite. So he donated them to this bar, and they pickled the toes. And so when you go to this bar, you can have the sour toe. So, which means you get a whiskey, and they put the toe in the whiskey, and it has to fall on your lips, and you drink the whiskey, and you get a little certificate that you drank the sour toe. So, these are some pictures. There's our certificates back in Dawson City. But I do have a treat for you. Just going to put that.
Believe it or not, there's a waiting list to have your toe be the Dawson City toe. Because they do dog sledding every year, and so they lose toes sort of frequently, and people want to be that toe.
So is the guy sitting
Okay,
there?
so I think
Is
I
it
have
his
to
toe?
No.
Oh.
close out the PowerPoint. Oh, I gotta close out the PowerPoint to run another video. Is that correct?
Well, this is your video and not mine.
Huh? Oh, good. So I got a treat here. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to close that out for a second. I got a little treat here for you. So this guy, believe it or not, his name is Captain Lee, David. Must be on your side of the Lee, the Scottish Lees. That's the toe.
There's a $2,500 fine if you accidentally swallow it.
Yeah.
Because apparently people started to think that was funny.
Oh.
That would stop you, wouldn't it?
It's whiskey.
If the toe's stuck, you have to kiss it for it to count.
You gotta tilt her back, it's gonna get in your lips.
So you gotta really take
I'm so glad my inability to take a shot well is memorialized now.
How expensive is it?
Hey, there you go. Captain Lee.
How much does that sourdough cost?
That cost.
Rob?
Just the price of your drink,
Oh,
and then you give them a
sorry.
tip. Yeah. Yeah. So here's the same thing.
This guy's gonna eat it.
Is the toenail still on it?
He tells you a little story about the legend of the trapper toe.
That's his first whiskey, right?
That toe's been around.
Let's see here. I just gotta, I had to take the one down and boot the one up, so just bear with me for a second. I'll get us right back on track. We have too much more. Okay, slideshow, current slide. Here we go. So, back to Dawson City. And we went back to Whitehorse, and this is interesting because this is the largest wooden fish ladder in the world. And I wrote some notes here with this. When we were there by mid-August, only 6 Chinook had come up. There were thousands in the past. They don't know why. Overfishing, climate change. 13 in total passed through this year. I checked out the stats later on, so there have been 6 when we were there, and it came to 13. Prior year's average was 1,000. So they've got some problems there. Now that's the Yukon River itself. There's tributaries of the Yukon. We were fly fishing with one, and it felt like it was a real. Their Chinook salmon turn red because of the krill they eat out in the ocean. And we were fishing grayling on a tributary of the Yukon, and I'm standing there, and all of a sudden, here's one of these few great big red Chinooks swam right up past me and just kept on going. Yeah, it was very cool. Very cool. So there's just some more of the fish ladder and stuff. Well, that's where we were when it swam up in front of me. They see Eryn's catching some.
I didn't get to see it because I was busy catching fish.
So then we're right near the end of the trip. The skies cleared again. We got a trip, we changed our section on the river because we didn't want to go through that narrows there where people often capsize. So we looked for a little calmer. Some of it was fast, but it was certainly not a challenging. It was a nice, relaxing canoe trip.
Tons of eagles.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
And I mentioned the crows here, I think, too. Or no, the ravens. We watched ravens as we were going down the river. The ravens were feeding on the cliffs, eating probably eggs or something from another bird. But as you went along, there was always a guard raven up in a tree, and when you went by the guard raven, it would start making a lot of noise, and the others would move off down further. They must be very smart birds, but you could see it happening. So as we went down this river, we stopped at this spot, and again we were catching a few grayling, just had a rest, and we put our canoe out there, and should I tell that story?
I knew you would.
So I'm at the stern of the canoe, and I'm positioning Eryn to fish the shoreline. So she's casting straight in. Well, the current started pulling the back out. She's casting straight in with a fly rod. Next thing I know, it was just like getting a punch in the face, and it was her streamer fly. Went right in here, and it's buried. So I reached up and nothing, right? So we're in the middle of nowhere, and the way you take a hook out is you take a loop of monofilament, you put it in the hook bend, and you just snap it out the same way. Well, I wasn't prepared to take time to do that, so I grabbed some pliers. Eryn's looking. This is all within like a few seconds, probably 15 seconds. Eryn's looking from the front, and she sees a streamer hanging out of my face. I grab some pliers, and I go, and pop it out, a little chunk of meat goes, but I got it here anyway. And Eryn just looks at me, she goes, "You savage."
I looked back, and like, it happened in seconds, but it felt like it was dragged out. I was like, oh no, I've done this. I'm immediately going to like, should we take him to a hospital? Like, what's our game plan for getting the barb gone? Like, how can we pull this out? And I can see the like glint in his eyes where I realize what he's about to do, because it's like he's steeled himself. And before I can even be like, don't rip it out, Oh, direct eye contact, you see the chunk come out. And then I thought, I'm like, if I was with anyone else on this trip, we would be freaking out.
Especially your sister.
My
You talk about you and your
Specifically
sister.
my sister. If I did that to Brooke, she would lose it on me. We'd bicker. What are we gonna do? Who's gonna take it out? How do we get this out? And it's like, didn't even have time to escalate because he just looked at me, grabbed his pliers, and oh.
No Band-Aids. eh?
So we headed back and, well, we came from Whitehorse. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for coming. I heard they're paying extra money and go to the door. That's any question, but we don't know anything.
Would you do it again?
Oh, if I had the opportunity, if Eryn did if she'd come with me, I'd go in a second. I'd even do those hikes again. Yeah.
You're gonna do the ridge, okay?
Pardon me?
You're gonna do the ridge up at the top?
Oh, yeah. I probably would do that a little differently.
Did you camp the whole time?
Yeah, now occasionally, when we wanted a break, we would get a hotel. I think we got one at
I
Hayes
tried to
Junction.
structure it every like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Or if I knew it was gonna be a really hard hike, I'd plan to have a hotel the next day. So you could shower, sleep in a bed, get warm.
How's the price of fuel up there, Rob?
Oh, God. I don't remember. Like, we didn't, if I remember right, it wasn't as shocking high as I expected because it was crazy high here,
Yeah.
right?
Food was expensive.
Right?
Food was expensive.
Food was very expensive.
Like fresh food.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure all of Whitehorse runs on diesel. Am I making that up?
No,
Which is pretty crazy.
yeah. There's a lot of Toyota Tacomas up there. We started counting those as compared to other trucks. It's a thing.
Yeah, every time a Tacoma passed, he would say, Tacoma, Tacoma. Yes. And then he bought one when he got back. My mom says thanks. From a logistics planning perspective, if you're planning on a trip to the Yukon, I would say my advice would be if you're going in July and August, book your campsites
Yeah.
around Whitehorse. Because we found it stressful, the pull-up ones in that area were more competitive and you'd be thinking all day like, whoa, I hope we get a spot tonight. Whereas once you're out of like a hour radius of Whitehorse, you could go back to just pull-up camping and something
We were
really
even
good.
on a long weekend there. They had some long weekend, and it didn't matter for us,
Outside of
outside of
Whitehorse
the-
area.
Yeah.
Where were you going, 2 weeks?
Closer to 3.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But we covered a lot of territory in that time. Paige?
So you mentioned you ate a lot of beans. Did you have freeze-dried food, canned food? What was your
That's a
food
good
situation like?
If we were in anywhere that was civilized, we'd get one of those cooked chickens and just devour it.
Oh, yeah.
Other than that, we had freeze-dry stuff.
The only time we used freeze-dried was if we went backcountry,
Yeah,
which was just Grizzly Lake.
yeah.
Because you're carrying everything, and so you're just trying to cut back on weight. But when we were like pull-up car camping, it was a lot of like spam and pastas.
Spam, boy,
Yeah.
yeah, pancakes.
I actually love spam.
We have similar food
We're
tastes.
both gross. I think you have to like rejig it if you're a healthy person. You could do better than that. You don't have to eat like garbage.
We like it.
But we're just human raccoons, so it's fine. Sorry.
Yeah, marmots
One could
weren't
argue
taking our
that.
food. They didn't want it.
I can't stand in Texas, I was pretty more of a better.
I would say desperate times, but honestly, we liked it.
And it's good after a day, you know?
Yeah, at that point you just want hot food.
Yeah. No, I'm a lucky man that I got to go on that and Eryn, you know. We did the Rockies and that on another trip and of course they were much more crowded than the Yukon. Yukon is just fantastic. Nobody's, off and fly fish anywhere and catch pretty and stuff. And we were just touching, scratching the surface.
You could go there for years
Oh,
and
yeah.
still have hikes.
There were a lot of people, like everybody's from somewhere else, it seemed. There were very few that were born and raised there, but people either went there and stayed, a couple of years and left, or they would go there and just get totally pulled into it all and never leave.
Yeah, I have a friend who moved there and ended up staying, and she said when you're a local there, it's really hard wanting to make friends with people because you know they're gonna leave.
Yeah.
It's like 3 years and then you're gone and I don't know if you're gonna stay. But then some do end up staying, so you take the gamble. But I think like it's a very transient area and that's hard.
White horses, they're not White Horse, Dawson is definitely transient.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Although you
even
got your
people that-
diehards there.
You got the diehards, yeah.